Side Part. It's like a book club with your best friend, but make it a podcast. Welcome back, crawlers, to another episode of Side Part. I'm Nikki, your bookish bestie, and today we are going to continue our crawl through book number 5 of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. This episode will focus in on part 2, which is The Vengeance of the Daughter. If you have not yet watched part 1, or you want to catch up on any of my other Dungeon Crawler Carl videos, they'll be linked down in the description below. And remember, you are reading along with me. I have not read ahead in this series, so all of my thoughts, theories, reactions are just based on the first 4 books and the first 2 parts of book number 5, which also means there will be spoilers for the entire series up to part 2 of book 5. Also, friendly reminder, these are adult books with some very adult scenes. I will do my best to keep it PG-13 for little ears, but please, please, please be mindful of your audience at home. I wanted to start a new segment this week where I share a few of your comments that you made on the previous week's video. I know I informally did that last week, but I think moving forward, I want to make it a regular part of the beginning of our episodes where I revisit something that somebody shared, or maybe a really good observation or an answer to a question I have. And it'll kind of fuel our discussion as we move forward in the book. So one comment that somebody gave in last week's video was about how Carl is really kind of hurting the factions with his actions. And they said, I think it was a missed opportunity not to talk about all that he is doing to basically weaken all the factions on floor 9. I also feel that all the liaisons, albeit seeing that they are impartial, have their own agenda, Oren and the others included. Also, please note that I said Oren's name right and did not add a random S. That's a big deal for me. My brain has to work really hard for some reason to keep his name straight, but I'm doing it. Oren. Anyway, going back to the comment, I agree. It was very evident in the meeting with Oren that all of the liaisons that were there and present with Carl and Quasar had their own agenda and their own reasons for being there. And you just get this feeling that even Oren is not as impartial as he presents himself to be. I know I briefly touched on how he impacted the armies in the Moroccos, but I feel like the commenter is absolutely right. I should have leaned way harder into that. And so I think that's also very important information moving forward, because I'm going to chat about a few things today. And I think this is good to have in the back of our brain. I don't know why I didn't put the 2 and 2 together, but someone commented, Empress popped in so all the NPCs could worship him. Obviously, that makes so much sense. I don't know why that didn't clock for me. I thought it was just this random thing that Matt threw in there just that we'd figure out later. Obviously that makes so much sense because we find out later, I think it was through Vraz's note, that all the NPCs in that town were worshiping Empress. So obviously, yes, that makes complete sense. And thank you to whoever commented that. One of the questions I had last week was, why wasn't Carl leaning harder on his teammates? Why was he keeping everything so close to the vest? It was something I was hoping he would change later. And someone just says, I'm just guessing, but Carl probably didn't tell Donut because he knows that the hunters are connected to the outside world and could be warned by the viewers. And we know this is an ongoing issue. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think it was also at the start of this book, I think outside viewers still had access to their chats until a little bit into the book, right before the hunters were released. And so, yeah, that makes complete sense. He has this whole attack plan and he wants to catch these hunters by surprise, but there's really no safe way. I mean, I think they were potentially using the invisible ink in the bathroom to communicate before. But nonetheless, I think Carl is just trying to get things done quick and efficient. And there's not a fast, safe way to communicate in the dungeon. Until now, a lot has changed on the playing field. I mean, we also know that the ability for hunters to get information now from the outside world has been restricted as well. And we'll chat about that a little bit more later. But I'm hoping with all of these dynamic shifts, Carl will definitely lean more on Donut and Mordecai, knowing that he can kind of pass information a little bit more freely without having it exposed. Because honestly, yeah, that makes complete sense why he would do what he did in the beginning of the story. I had some looming questions at the end of last week, and I thought it'd be good to start there after talking about your guys' comments. And I think it kind of plays into not only the last comment that we talked about with Carl not relying on his party, because part of my questions were about the party and the guild system and how that was going to play out. And then my other question was about the ring. And I mean, I know he used the ring in these chapters, but I don't know if we really have a good understanding about how the ring is completely going to impact him. I have concerns, but I'll share those concerns later on. But we did learn a lot more about the guild system. And one of those things is that Imani is going to take over, which actually I feel really good about that. I didn't think I'd like Carl not to be the guild leader, but I think it's good that he's not kind of taking on this responsibility. And I know Katya kind of waited for this moment to get their guild together so she could, go off on her own. And things are getting kind of complicated with the issuing of quests. So her departure from their party makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. But Carl does say something that was really important, and I made note of it. And he says, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret, of loneliness, that we'd gone off on our own for this floor. But the path that we're traveling was too dangerous. The others were doing important work, and our presence would be nothing but a distraction. And man, I don't know. It kind of just gives you this feeling that Carl, this quote really hit me hard because I don't know. This is not an accurate depiction of who Carl is, but every time I think of Carl, I think of that little boy who deserves so much better. And so when he has these moments where he is kind of being left by somebody, and while Katya's reasons are virtuous and they make sense, and I don't think Katya being in their party really makes much sense at all anymore. Part of me wishes Katya would just stay so he wouldn't have to experience this loneliness anymore. I mean, I have so much empathy for his character. And then, okay, wait. The guild also is being named Safe Home Yolanda, which is the same character that kind of reminded Carl in the beginning of during book one, I should say. She was one of the Meadowlark employees, and she was brutally unalived. And she was so kind and caring and kind of was a reflection of everything that his parents weren't. And then through her death, we kind of got this introspection with Carl about his own trauma with his own parents. And gosh, there's just so much going on here. And I just feel like Carl, we're only scratching the surface on all of the trauma that he's repressed. And quite frankly, he has to in this situation. I mean, this dungeon is nothing if not just relentless and exhausting. And this, I made a comment, I think it was early in my videos, where I was like, and rather than processing through things, he just kind of carries on. And someone's like, yeah, because he has to. And you're like, yeah, you're right. This is not a safe time to be processing through literally anything. And it's literally about pure survival. And he's in fight or flight right now. And Carl is very much not in the flight mode. He's in fight. He is ready to engage and take it all down. And I think he's channeling everything that he has, everything that's kind of pent up within him to get back at these people within the dungeon. And we see this consistently throughout these chapters, especially. TLDR, we feel like Katya's departure makes sense. It is practical, maybe a touch sad for Carl, but I don't know. I still feel good about the fact that they're still attached to their guild system and then also their Desperado Club membership as well. So Katya is still very much involved in the story, and we're still going to get glimpses of her. But at the same time, I'm kind of feeling good about her departure from their party. So as the title of this part suggests, we are pushed into Signet's quest, the vengeance of the daughter, really, really, really quickly. And right away, we meet Clint and Holger, and they are werecasters. And maybe you're better than me and you knew instantly what that meant, but basically they're furry men who turn into these insane warrior beaver things. And I did not see that coming. Maybe I'm not well versed in my mythical creatures, but wild. They're just these big beavers. But I really love these two so much. I appreciated the dynamic that they added to this part of the book. But as soon as you met them, you kind of knew there was going to be some heartbreak there. I mean, they were just a touch too likable, in my opinion. And then also with this quest, we realize Samantha is going to be a much bigger part of this series than I initially thought she was going to be. I don't know what I thought. I thought maybe she was going to be there for like a spot of comedic relief every now and then. And quite frankly, because Samantha had such a big part in this part of the book, I feel like she needs her own section of this episode. I mean, I think I almost viewed her as more of like a caricature in the last book. And we know she is much more powerful than she's letting on. And like, she is so chaotic. She's got this insane amount of confidence, like heavy on the insane part though. And I don't know, I feel like every time she enters the chat, literally and like figuratively, she is just full of this brazen confidence that she can take on anything. And it leads you to feel like, wait, but like, can she? Like, is she capable of more than I think she is? Like, right now, I think she's just this, like rubber doll head. But yeah, maybe there is a lot more to this story than I initially kind of gave it credit for. I thought it was just like, another like random chaotic thing that Matt entered into the story to make it a little bit more funny. And I think maybe I saw a video where he said initially that's what it was, but then she was like this perfect connection to like the gods. And so he made her a bigger part of the story, which I think is so funny and actually makes complete sense for how he writes. But I feel like maybe I'm wrong with this. Please correct me in the comments, as always, if I am wrong. But I feel like in some ways she's kind of taken Donut's role of being like the super chaotic one and the funny reprieve. And Donut's still very funny. And Donut can feel, she just knows how to like really put Carl in his place. But that chaos funny, like just doing things haphazardly or just like on a whim, I feel like that role is like kind of shifting to Samantha a little bit. And Donut is kind of becoming more the voice of reason, especially in the chat. Like, I think Donut even makes mention at one point, like, do you notice how annoying she is in the chat? And I feel like at once that used to be Donut. And maybe I'm a little bit off base here. And as always, correct me if I am, but I just feel like Samantha is, I don't know, she's very needed in these chapters too, because there's a lot of dark, heavy things happening. And so we appreciate her breath of fresh air as always. And then we also see Carl like using her more and more. And I think Donut's a little bit wary of her, but Carl is using her as bait, as recon. His ability to throw her and recall her with the Chistero is not expected, but it's really handy and chaos causing at the same time. And we also see her super desperate to meet Signet. And she was ridiculously annoying about it, but nowhere did I expect that the whole reason she wanted to meet Signet was to get Signet to like herself and give her her body. She was also so casual about it, as if it was like no big deal. But before we dive too far into Samantha, I want to take a brief pause and I want to talk about Odette's show. I feel a little bit bad for saying this, but I feel like I was slightly underwhelmed by the B reveal. Sure, it was like a huge moment for Donut, and I think she really got to say her piece, and I loved that for her. Also, by the way, when Donut said her piece, I definitely got the sense that Odette was recording, and I think it was kind of obvious, like she was speaking to someone on the side, like maybe like roll the cameras, and so you kind of get this sense of like, that's not going to end up so good for later, or it's going to air at a really inconvenient time, as everything does, or it's going to be used as a way to manipulate Donut. Like, I don't know how that's going to play out, but I don't trust Odette. I really don't trust Odette. But I feel like I expected more, maybe more from Carl. I'm not sure. I think he showed just like how walled off he is, and like how much he's just like really just lasered in on the goal at hand, and how disconnected he is emotionally from B. Maybe he never really truly was connected emotionally to her. I think maybe I was expecting more drama, but then again, I feel like a shell-shocked Beatrice kind of made sense. B is broken. Deeply broken, isolated, scared, disoriented. But I do think my favorite part was the exchange between Carl, Donut, and Odette before the show even aired. So I think Zev was there as well, and they're kind of sharing that they're going to bring B out, and Carl was like, absolutely not. Forget it. Like, F off. We're not doing this. Like, he doesn't want to put Donut through that. And he's kind of playing that role of protector, which I do appreciate. I appreciate he's like always like, without a fault, like in Donut's corner. But Donut says this to Carl, and I think it's really important. She says, "You're trying to protect me. I know that. Remember what I told you before, that we need to trust each other. Well, it's time for you to trust me, okay? It sounds like this is going to happen one way or another. At least now we have a moment to prepare. And then she looks to Odette and she says, thank you for saving her from becoming a dungeon boss, and thank you for the warning. We'll start the program as usual, and we'll do the reunion. That'll be all. See you on set. And so we kind of get this like really posed, put together Donut who's kind of acting very mature, which we know, I mean, she's very emotionally impacted by the situation, but she's giving the front that she's not. And obviously after the program airs, Donut just like lays into Beatrice, and, you know, Bee's just kind of like so confused because not only is Donut saying this all to her, like, I don't think Beatrice can even get past the fact that she's like talking. Like, can you put yourself in Beatrice's like shoes for a moment? Her whole entire planet's been taken over. She is like malnourished, confused, disoriented. She's whisked away by these aliens. People are trying to steal her, or I'm sorry, aliens were trying to steal her. And now she's transported like as a hologram onto this show, and her pet's there with her ex-boyfriend, and the pet can talk. I mean, even if she's not drugged, like this has to feel like a fever dream. And so you can't fault the way Bee is responding. I think, you know, the reality TV lover in me just wanted like chaos and drama. My favorite quote was at the end where she says, "You're not my person anymore. Carl is. He always has been." And this was not for Beatrice. I would argue this was almost for Carl to hear. And this kind of declaration, like we saw Carl kind of declare to her that he was not going to leave her on floor 9. And now Donut is just declaring that Carl is her person. And now here's my concern. These are both very large declarations. And is that going to turn into something that they're going to be kind of forced to face later on, where it's almost going to be impossible for Carl to choose, or I'm sorry, is it going to be almost impossible for Donut to choose Carl? Or is it going to be almost possible for Carl not to leave Donut on floor 9? Like, they're making these very hard and fast declarations, and I think they're coming from a very genuine place. But the dungeon has a way of making you eat your words. And like, this is where my concern lies. Going back to Samantha's role though, we see how Carl is continually using Samantha more and more like a weapon. I mean, when the hunters from the dream were trying to attack them, Carl like affixes these like seeking missiles to her head and launches her with the Chistera. And here's where things start to get rather grim. I mean, we start getting this feeling that the hunters that were sent here are just viewed very much expendable by the factions. I mean, we know Carl really, really hurt the factions by flooding Laracos, and then now you're starting to feel like whoever they're sending here is kind of just like aliens, beings that they just do not care about. And then so one of the members of the dream is crying and like, or pleading with Carl saying, please, I'm just an accountant. They offered us money to come and hunt. Like, I'm just here to try to make my life better for my family. And Carl just like starts his like, I think he called it, or Donut called it like the bad guy soliloquy. And she chastises him for that. And she's like, okay, we don't need to do this every time we're like confronting something. But I mean, I think Carl isn't doing it for himself. I think it's very much for the viewers. And he wants them to hear the words that he's saying to these hunters. Like, he wants everyone to know how angry and how much he's committed to just like making everybody that's involved with this dungeon pay. And so Carl eliminates the hunter, and you get the sense that these hunters though, I mean, not so much Vra, obviously, or some members of the Skull Empire, but I feel like you just get the sense that the hunters that were sent here are almost just as much victims as like the crawlers and the NPCs as well. But it's equally clear that Carl just like, he just doesn't care. He doesn't care about like the sob stories. And it's getting harder and harder, I think, for Carl to kind of, I think what's really happening is Carl's becoming like consumed by his mission. And like I talk about it a little bit later, I think, but there's like this like constant referring to like this river that's flowing through his brain, and he can hear it roaring. And part of me just wonders if it's like his rage, and it's almost just becoming deafening at some points. And we can see like kind of Carl becoming more and more unhinged, but I can't remember where I saw this. Maybe it was a comment on one of my videos. I'll have to look back, but someone made reference to the people that are honestly the only ones who are able to succeed in this dungeon are the ones that are a little bit unhinged, a little bit chaotic, and like unafraid to just be a little bit crazy. Because I think if you were just like a, even-keeled, rational, like safe person, I don't know if you would find success in this dungeon. Or I think there's some merit to that, right? Like, we're finding that Carl is very adept in this dungeon, and that were he to find humanity or find this common ground with like every hunter, every NPC, like Burrow boss. I think it would just like literally unravel him, and it's just not even possible. And as he progresses through the dungeon, like he has to become more and more hardened. It only makes sense for his character. We do also see this indifference when he is confronted with one of the female orc hunters from the Skull Empire as well. We find out that she's one of the last hunters for the Skull Empire, which has some implications, as we know. I had a few questions though, like why weren't there more hunters sent to Carl from the Skull Empire? They seem very intent on like exacting vengeance. Is there a financial issue there? Did Carl wipe out a good deal of their army, like with the flooding of Laracos? I don't know, like what's going on there? I feel like the indication that I feel like us getting that information that there's only 3 hunters and like she was the last one and now Vraz open to kind of hunt for Carl. I feel like that was an important piece of information just about like maybe their financial standpoint or how they're kind of functioning within these faction wars. Maybe it's a good omen for Carl that the Skull Empire is not as equipped to kind of confront him on a lower floor. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I might be misremembering, but I believe the Skull Empire paid to be able to pursue Carl first. And then once they did not succeed, or after a certain amount of time, I'm not quite sure about that piece. Vra was clear then to go after him with the hive. And the female orc makes that very clear. She's like, keep me around for at least a few more days to kind of keep the hive at bay. And Carl's like, yeah, no, I just don't care. And here's my concern was that Carl marks her with the ring before he kills her. And I'm just concerned about like the ring becoming too intoxicating for Carl. I don't know if it's my experience with the Lord of the Rings, but forgive me for not trusting rings in general. I'm just also getting the feeling that these hunters are kind of pitiful. Aside from like Vra, I think she's going to be a formidable foe, but these hunters just don't seem well equipped to, one, be hunting in general, but also to be hunting Carl. And I have to keep in mind, Carl is like the #1 crawler, so he's going to be one of the more formidable crawlers that they come across. But I kind of feel like they just picked anyone in their system to kind of come and go to these hunting grounds. And perhaps it's because they are high stakes and you could potentially actually die when you are on this level. But I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be a little scarier. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's how I thought it would be a little bit more intense, if you will. I normally don't highlight a ton of Carl quotes. I usually find myself highlighting a lot of Donna quotes, but I feel like Carl had a lot of really good like little phrases here and there that I just wanted to share with you all. And before like the epic frog boss battle with Claude, that Carl prematurely decided to engage with, Carl says, I have never claimed to be a smart person. We all do stupid things. A lot of times people do stupid stuff, not because they are stupid, but because in the heat of the moment, they make rash decisions. It's a different sort of thing. That's my excuse here. And I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, he doesn't think of himself as a smart person, but I would argue that Carl is actually very intelligent and often downplays his intelligence. And he is able to come up with like these crazy plans very, very quickly. He's always thinking 10 steps ahead. He's a voracious reader, which doesn't inherently make you smart, but anyone who reads a ton has to have at least some want to, I don't know, at least somewhat increase their intelligence, right? Maybe not. I don't know. I read a lot of like stuff that I don't know if it increases my intelligence at all, but I do enjoy it very, very much. Sorry, I digress. But also, he has this awareness around his rash decision making, and he is very aware that like sometimes in the heat of the moment, like things just happen, and he's like, I'm just gonna chalk it up to that. And then so with the frog boss battle, we know that like the dungeon was kind of guiding him to go meet this frog boss like with Signet, and Carl, with his summoning capabilities with Samantha, actually brought the frog to him. And so one thing I loved about this in particular is he disrupted the dungeon's narrative. And anytime Carl gets to do that, I'm always rooting for him. So I'm like, good job. But the battle was so chaotic, but also went by very quickly. And I know Carl made note of that. But between the protective shell, Mongo going absolutely feral, but Carl like also being inside the frog while Mongo was going feral, and like Donut launching the fireballs at the frog. And I don't even... There's also this moment before Mongo like went and attacked the frog before Carl ended up inside him. Like Donut like backflipped off a Mongo and somehow like expertly landed on Carl's shoulder. And this is going to be a sidebar. It's moments like these that I'm questioning, like, how are they going to do this with CGI with a television show? I mean, these moments are epic, but like, it's going to cost a fortune to replicate some of this crazy, crazy stuff. Sorry, I'm going to get back to the actual content. And then Samantha just has this really funny way of just taking credit for kills like all the time. And so when she rolls out of the frog that she was consumed by multiple times, might I add, she's like, yeah, see, told you I could kill him. And it's like she always is overestimating her ability. I know we've talked about this before, but we keep getting these moments of foreshadowing that like perhaps she is far more powerful than she's letting on. And I know Donut alludes to that as well. And Carl's very wary of like that possibility. And so I think Samantha is going to end up being a very formidable force. And I'm actually kind of hoping she gets her body back at some point. The saddest part of this entire battle, though, was the loss of the caterpillar, Miss Nadine. And I think this leads perfectly into our next segment. My favorite NPC of the week is Miss Nadine. You know, Carl obviously just feels immense responsibility for her death, and he's very quick to make that claim, like, you know what, sorry, it was my fault. And Arson and Holger are quick to just shut that down. And even though Miss Nadine was like their mother, they're just fully intent on like not letting Carl take that blame. It's moments like these where you realize like the truly the like crucial piece that like NPCs play. And I don't even know how we ended up creating this segment each week where I have a favorite NPC, but like I said this before, but they're like brief moments in this dungeon. They have like these really lasting, impressionable like scenes and just words that just stick with you. And this moment with Carl like trying to shoulder this blame and like these two NPCs like not letting him do that, like what a beautiful gift that I don't realize they're giving to Carl, because I mean he is nothing if not willing to take blame for like a lot. If you want to blame him for something, I think he'll happily accept that and he will take it. But we also get this really cool kind of grotesque moment where Miss Nadine and Clint were destroyed in the battle, and a turtle or a tortoise, I don't remember, but like using the quills and I don't know, basically making the remnants of Miss Nadine into a tattoo on her body. And Donut's like, this is gross. And I would kind of agree, but then there was this really beautiful moment where Miss Nadine appeared as a tattoo, and the other tattoos like were giving it space, and then Clint showed up because Miss Nadine had so much love for Clint that he ended up just being part of the tattoo as well. And we also learned that the tattoos on Signet's body that transform into these big creatures are not the actual creatures themselves. They're these blood and ink elementals, and they're kind of a combination of like the remnants of the being. So they could either be, you know, they could be creatures that she has fought with or against, but anyone she deems worthy, she uses the remnants of their body and the memory she has of them and makes them into like these new blood and ink elementals. Like I said, this was all kind of gross, but also kind of really beautiful. And it was like this really sweet moment. And then you're kind of like sucked out of the story a little bit, and you're like, these epic story arcs and all these situations all like made up. Like how insane, and like these crazy just like story arcs and like all of these rich history moments and like these creatures that are dying and being preserved through ink and tattoo. Like none of it's like real. But is it not real? I mean, it's real to them. It's very real to them. And so, yeah. moving forward a little bit, I would be remiss if I did not share my favorite Donut quote from these chapters. And it is Viva la Revolution, Carl. And it was revealed that Donut also smuggled Valte's secret agents to Zev and the Boran Emancipation Front. Like, when is Donut casually doing all of this stuff? And we just think Donut's like this funny, fluffy cat. And then we find out she's doing all this crazy stuff in the background, like communicating with Zev through the messaging boards. Apparently, like, just planning like this, like, entire revolution within the system. Like, she's just entered. Like, this is crazy. And then also, apparently, Zev is part of these covert ops. This is wild, actually. This whole situation is wild. And we also get to see Zev really trying to help them, like, a lot more in these chapters. Like, urging them to get to safe rooms. We see her kind of like trying to advocate with Odette, like, as much as she can, right? But we don't see her getting in trouble for it anymore. And so that's indicating us, like, yeah, sure, she's trying to be a little bit more careful, I'm sure, with her wording and whatnot. But this new leadership is impacting more than I think we realize right now. I guess my concern is there going to be even more outside interference in the dungeon, because there doesn't seem to be quite the same level of oversight. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but something has definitely switched behind the scenes that I don't think we have the full picture on yet. Which I think this all leads perfectly into our honorable mention segment. And the first honorable mention that I have is that Carl and Donut now have a new sponsor, because we know that the Valte now own 51% of the Boran Corporation, which makes them majority shareholders. And while nothing seems to be on the outside changing very much in the dungeon, and we've been assured by the Boran Corporation that things will continue as scheduled, we do know that there is like a civil war going on in their home system. And the new sponsors that Carl and all the other top 10 received was the Apothecary. They are sponsoring all the top 10 crawlers, which is sus because, we'll get to this in a second, but I'm confused for a couple reasons here. We know the Apothecary are like that Krakarin collective mind group, and they also are kind of in league with the Plenty, who are Caprids. And so if the Caprids are in league with the Apothecary, the Plenty, weren't the Caprids like the... Wait, I'm getting this confused. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. The Plenty are the Caprids, who are also talking to Maggie, who were trying to convince Maggie to go after Carl. Right? Yes. So if the Plenty were trying to eliminate Carl, but now the Apothecary are sponsoring Carl, is that like a misalignment of their interests? Can someone help me tease this piece apart? Because this is where I get really confusing. Like, what is the incentive for the Apothecary to sponsor all the top 10s, especially when it's kind of like known that the Butcher's Masquerade is an attempt at kind of eliminating all the top crawlers? Another honorable mention that I have is that Carl is going to attend CrawlCon, much to his dismay. But I just think this is a really fun little add into the series. And obviously it's a play on like Comic-Con, but I just thought it was like really fun. I'm kind of sad that Donut doesn't get to go though. I feel like Donut has been taking a back seat a little bit lately. And Carl, obviously being the number one crawler, is very desired, but I kind of feel bad for Donut in some of these scenes, because she's like, what? I would love to go. Why won't they take me? And then you have to wonder, is there like a hidden, like a kind of a behind the scenes reason that they want to kind of separate Donut and Carl? Another honorable mention is I feel like there's been some foreshadowing happening about teaming up with Lucia Marr. And by the end of these chapters, we end up in her town. So you can only assume that there will be some sort of confrontation, but that Carl and Donut will end up kind of working with her in some fashion, which I'm actually kind of excited for, because I actually don't think she's as crazy as she's being portrayed. Because we also know that Carl has been just kind of cast as like this like crazy crawler. And so I think, I mean, the eyeball thing is weird and gross, but I don't know, maybe she's not as crazy as she's being portrayed, and she's kind of been doing this all on her own. And so I would almost, I don't know, maybe she does need a friend. Maybe they all need a friend. I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning, but hunters can no longer communicate with the outside. And so I think this is going to be really good news for Carl, and it's going to make for some interesting situations as they run into new hunters, which I am kind of excited for. I don't know if I should be excited for the confrontation with Fra, but I think Carl is going to come out victorious. I mean, We still have like 5 more books to go, so how could he not? Another honorable mention is that fast travel could be potentially introduced to this story moving forward, which I think could be kind of a fun thing to add. I'm not really sure how that would work like mechanically, but I'm looking forward to see how Matt potentially makes that happen. There was another mention of them getting new beds, the Instacot that refreshes them in 60 seconds, and Carl seemed to hate it. And I feel like it's just yet another way for the dungeon to dehumanize them. I feel like it's another way to take away like that little piece of humanity. And I don't know, I feel like there's something nice about sleeping part of your day away. Like, I love sleep. I'm a big sleep person. So I kind of get where Carl's coming from and why it kind of makes him feel uneasy. Like, taking away our ability to sleep and rest. And even though we feel okay, I mean, there's something just so restorative about like shutting your mind off for like actual hours and knowing that you have like 8 hours to just not think and just to sleep. Something I was excited for was Donut got another bracelet to add to her constitution. And anytime she adds to her constitution, I just get so incredibly excited and happy. And I just know it's just going to offer her that much more protection. Something we learned again, and we kind of already knew this, but we know the dream is just like aggressively hunting Louis. And I feel like this is going to become a bigger plot point moving forward. And it's going to somehow involve Donut, or at least Carl, entering into somewhat of a precarious situation where they will potentially have to come to Louis or maybe Juicebox's defense later on the lower floor. I don't know. But I think Carl's going to end up getting snagged in this. It gets brought up way too often for him not to be. Another thing that I was a little bit annoyed with, that Carl did not get the Avatar reference when they were talking about the all tree, and like Donut's just trying to like explain what movie it was, and he's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh my gosh, like when they were even beginning the description of the all tree, I was like, this is 100% the tree from Avatar. And so, you know, Carl, I'm a little bit disappointed with you for not getting that movie reference, but whatever. We'll let it slide. You're in a really stressful situation, okay? And I would not be doing these chapters justice if I did not mention the alarm trap that blared Wonderwall. So I found this part particularly amusing because my husband and I have like this inside joke about Wonderwall being like one of the worst songs ever. And whenever someone says like, oh, I love this song, or it's like one of my favorite songs, we kind of just give each other like this like look of knowing. And it's never a judgment piece, but it's always like, we hate this song. I think if you grew up in the early 2000s, like every one of your friends that could kind of play guitar just like learn these chords and would like terribly sing this song, and you kind of just got sick of it. I don't know, maybe this is a very niche experience, so take it with a grain of salt. But I love that it's becoming canon for DCC, and I feel really bad if this is because Matt just adores this song, but to me, it's actually really, really funny because of that reason alone. That's kind of like pre-Dungeon Crawler Carl. Like, this was like kind of an inside joke for like my family. So I don't know. I really appreciated it. And I think it's a good way to kind of end our discussion of these chapters. I have some looming questions to close out these chapters. And namely, the first is, what's with the big dinosaurs? Namely, Big Tina. Like, what's the deal with that? What are these big dinosaurs? What are they doing? How are they going to play into the storyline? I'm looking forward to it, but like cautiously so. And then also there's this threat of Ra. What's the deal with that? When is she going to attack? We have this like looming threat. We know that she's kind of clear for takeoff, so to speak. Of course, it will probably be at the most inconvenient moment because it always is. But nonetheless, what's going on with Ra? That's my looming question, I guess. My last looming question has to do directly with the Vengeance of the Daughter kind of storyline. And it is, are they going to attack Imogen preemptively, Signet Sister, or are they going to wait for the Butcher's Masquerade? I mean, we learned a few important things about the Butcher's Masquerade in these chapters. And we know, one, it's an attempt to weed out the top crawlers. We also know that Odette thinks that they should bail before the Masquerade and go down the stairs early. Will they? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think this book is titled The Butcher's Masquerade for them to skip the entire thing. So we'll see what happens there. But if I had to guess, if I had to put money on it, I would say that they are going to possibly, I think they're going to try to seek out Imogen ahead of time. And they're going to kind of disrupt the entire Vengeance of the Daughter storyline somehow. I'm hopeful that they will do it with Signet, but you know what? I don't know. We'll see what happens. Join me next week as I dive into part 3 of The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. What did I miss? I'm sure there are things that you'd like me to chat more about next week, or things that maybe I didn't chat about enough. Let me know down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get alerted when there's new episodes. Thank you so much for crawling with me today. Have a great week. Bye.